An Approach to the FIGU Association Free Interest Group for Border and Humanities and Ufology Studies. And Billy Meier, called Billy Edward Albert Meier, the Simja Say Silver Star Center. Hinter Schmidt-Rüti 1225, 8495. Schmidt-Rüti is home to the Association FIGU, Freie Interessengemeinschaft für Grenz- und Geisteswissenschaften und Ufologiestudien. The association has existed since 1975 and was founded by Billy Edward Albert Meier, known as Billy Edward Albert Meier for short, who says that he is in contact with the Plejaren from the same constellation Plejaren, which is located in a different space-time continuum from our dimension.
Question: Who, what, and how is Billy Edward A. Meier? How did he get his name Billy, and how did the Simyase Silver Star Center come about?
Answer: The name Billy is world famous and can be found thousands of times on the internet, along with effectively truthful articles, treatises, reports, and descriptions, but also lies and malicious slander regarding his personality, his missionary activities, and his contacts, which are attested to well over 100 times. A. Meier was given the name Billy in the 1960s in Tehran, Persia, when he worked in a wise private capacity for various countries and their governments as a detective against crime and criminality. The name was given to him by an American woman from Los Angeles who compared him to the Western legends Wild Bill Hickok and Billy the Kid because of his appearance and clothing. However, he is also known as UFO Meier, at least in the Zurich Oberland, where he is particularly well known to many people from the Teus Valley. He is generally described as media shy, but this does not correspond to the truth, as he actually only keeps his distance from the media, that is to say journalists, and is represented by media representatives of the association, because many journalists spread some very nasty untruths and slander in their articles about him as a person and FIGU leader, as well as about his work and his contacts. This was in addition to the fact that various journalists published interviews in journals and newspapers that never took place, in the style of miserable smear journalism. Since his return from the Middle East, etc., that is to say, since April 1977, Billy Meier has been living in the former Hinterschmidt-Rüti farmhouse, which was completely run down in terms of buildings and land when he took it over, but was built up by the members of the association under the expert guidance and leadership of Billy Edward Albert Meier as an all-rounder into the Simja Silver Star Center and a world-famous gem, a little paradise known far and wide. This is, of course, also marveled at by many hikers and visitors, as well as being maintained by the long-standing core group members, with many passive members also lending a hand every year.
Question: What is the philosophy of the FIGU? Is it religious, a sect, and what obligations does it recognize towards the state, and what is its attitude towards expressions of opinion and freedom of expression?
Answer: It is not a philosophy, but a teaching, the teaching of truth, teaching of the spirit, teaching of life, which is simply called spiritual teaching for short. It is absolutely free of religion, sex, and politics, and just as absolutely free of proselytizing. And since the FIGU Association is neither a religion nor a sect, but a legal personality, municipal, state, and religious taxes must be paid. It is therefore forbidden to engage in religious, sectarian, political, and proselytizing activities within the association itself and in relation to the teaching and its dissemination. Only if human beings endeavor to contact the FIGU out of their own initiative and interest and ask for information about the teaching, etc., will information be provided and the cause of the teaching and ufology clarified. Thus, neither religion nor sectarianism or politics are allowed in the association, although politics can be practiced in a private wise, because this corresponds to a private matter that must not be affected by the association. official or military matters, as well as all state regulations, obligations and demands, etc., in which members of the association are or become involved, also fall within the private sphere in every respect and are not influenced by FIGU. Furthermore, the FIGU as an association is as neutral as Switzerland is also as a state. And with regard to the laws, ordinances and regulations, etc., issued by the state, the FIGU behaves absolutely in accordance with the law, and therefore does not act in any way against the laws, etc., issued by the state, although freedom of speech is maintained in accordance with Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 10th of December 1948. This also means that every member of the association is aware that they can and may express their personal opinion freely and openly, and do not have to fear any reprisals for doing so.
Question. How can teaching be understood if it is not a philosophy?
Answer. The teaching of the Spirit, or teaching of truth, teaching of the Spirit, teaching of life basically corresponds to a teaching of life that shows how human beings should first and foremost build, teach, educate, and evolve themselves in a creatively natural way in relation to their own personality in order to become true and valuable in themselves and capable of living. In second place are the relationships towards fellow human beings as well as towards nature, all its fauna and flora and life itself, which means that the human being should become independent and learn in every conceivable possible relationship in order to free himself from life-damaging errors and illusions and to adjust to the reality and actuality of life.
Question. What errors and illusions does this specifically mean?
Answer. Specifically, it refers to all beliefs that human beings indulge in and unnecessarily pay attention to, because in principle they should not believe but be effectively knowledgeable in all things and factors that approach them. Effective knowledge, however, can only be where something can be proven by a fact, which in other words means that there can only be truth where it emerges from reality and actuality in a demonstrable and comprehensible, self-evident manner. Therefore, only actual reality can contain the effective truth. Belief, however, is only ever based on an assumption of a conjecture, which is far removed from a verifiable reality and actuality. Only when a truth is recognized that is founded in a verifiable reality and actuality is faith no longer given and also no longer possible, because then a certainty is given that is irrefutable. Faith is therefore false in any case, whether it is simply when someone says something and this is simply believed, or whether it is in relation to a religious or sectarian belief, in relation to a religious heresy or sectarian doctrine that is built on illusions.
Question. But the FIGU members do have their faith, because they are also only dependent on believing what Billy tells them, which moreover he cannot prove, because he is the only one, and because everyone only gets the information from him, and thus second hand, which however contradicts the fact that it should not be believed, because thereby it must be believed.
Answer. This is not true in this wise, because FIGU members do not believe. Basically, they are not forced into a belief, as is the case with religions, sects, and certain religious philosophies, because no human beings are dogmatized, indoctrinated, or infiltrated in any way by FIGU with regard to teaching or anything else, nor are they also persuaded or influenced in any wise. All FIGU members of the core group and the passive group, as well as all acquaintances, friends and interested parties, are learners of their own accord, uninfluenced in mind and reason by dishonest, misleading, illusion-creating, and believing attempts at persuasion. They are all learners who work out and elaborate within themselves what they study from Billy Meier's books and writings, thereby experiencing within themselves what they learn and create for the way they lead and shape their lives. Every member who learns must therefore do so at their own discretion and according to their own understanding and reason, and thus recognize within themselves what is correct and what is wrong, in order to then act accordingly and determine their own behavior. The thoughts and feelings are therefore not predetermined, but only the teaching material, which must be worked through by each human being themselves and according to their own understanding and reason and implemented in life. The teaching as a whole is therefore not aimed at ensuring that all human beings have to learn uniformly within the same framework, but in such a way that everyone learns purely individually and according to their own understanding, reason, and judgment. In this way, everyone remains independent in themselves and also free to make their own decisions without having to believe something that is dogmatically thrown down in order for it to be believed. Through the teachings of Billy Edgeworth Albert Meier, human beings remain absolutely free in themselves, in every decision, action, and behavior, and thus everyone is also free to become, be, and also live a true human being. So he does not need faith, but only the knowledge of the effective truth, which only exists from the actual reality. And he also needs the self-created personal security of what he creates valuable things for himself. His own life design and lifestyle in an honest and just way for his life and his ability to exist in connection with good interpersonal relationships, in balance, peace, freedom, and harmony, and in a vital way with consideration for nature and its fauna and flora. This is what the FIGU, its members and Billy, stand for and teach: the teaching of truth, teaching of the Spirit, teaching of life, that is to say, the teaching of the Spirit, which can be read and studied in 365 teaching letters, as well as in many thousands of pages of instructive explanations and teaching articles, etc., in more than 60 books and many articles. Studying these works is different from reading conventional, banal books, from which human beings cannot learn their effectives, but only a school knowledge. The spiritual teaching does not impart school knowledge or simple general knowledge, but an effective and valuable life teaching that human beings must study thoroughly and use to build themselves and their evolution of consciousness. However, he cannot do this through faith, but only by using his intelligence and his own perceptive faculties and reason to recognize himself and shape himself into what he must be, namely a true human being. To do this, however, he must learn and understand what life is fundamentally about, and that he must be himself and his own ruler over himself in every conceivable relationship, which means that he must be aware of the effective truth that emerges solely from the reality of reality. Every religious, sectarian, or other belief, however, prevents the effective truth of reality from being recognized because it deludes human beings into believing something that is erroneous, confused, illusory, and even mistaken. Therefore, FIGU and every FIGU member do not need faith, but only the truth that emerges solely from the reality of reality, which can be accepted as the only proof. And reality is also what Billy Meier brings, what is to be proven as truth, because firstly, he, and thus also the FIGU, have photographic evidence of extraterrestrial spaceships, that is to say beam ships, which Billy had to and was allowed to photograph, which are as real as the sun in the sky, whereby it has long been proven by experts that these are authentic photographs and not fakes, and this against all antagonistic lies and slander. Secondly, the teaching of truth, teaching of the Spirit, teaching of life proves with absolute certainty that everything in human life actually is and functions as the teaching teaches, so that there is also no deception in this respect, but a real certainty of the correctness of the teaching, which cannot be found anywhere else on earth and is only taught in the FIGU, and that this teaching effectively corresponds to real reality, does not demand or mislead, nor does it promise anything believable, stupid, false or empty or impossible to achieve, but is effective in every respect and helps human beings to progress in every respect, is proven by many statements from users of the teachings, all of whom endeavor to follow the spiritual teachings and confirm the effectiveness of the instructions, teachings, and insights given. Thirdly, there are many witnesses, see, for example, Witness Book, who have observed or experienced for themselves how Billy was able to photograph beam ships and record beam ship buzzes on tape, etc., or who were present when he spoke with extraterrestrials. This, in addition to the fact that many witnesses were able to observe the Pleiaren beam ships or even Pleiaren personalities themselves when they visited Billy Edgeworth Albert Meier, walked around with him, or walked around the center grounds. And as for second-hand information, this effectively only relates to a small amount of information given by the Pleiaren that relates to general worldly things and happenings that are not related to what can be brought into direct connection with the teaching of truth, teaching of spirit, teaching of life. So there are certainly reports of conversations held between the Pleiaren and Billy Edgeworth Albert Meier, but these have nothing to do with the teaching of the Spirit, which is solely mission-related and is worked out, written down and taught by Billy Meier on the basis of the ancient teaching, and is effectively also only an instruction manual and a guide for it, how and where the human being must touch, begin and act within himself, in his thought, feeling, psyche, consciousness world, in order to mold himself into a true and viable human being, and to be an effectively true and viable human being who is also in harmony with fellow human beings as such, and with nature, its fauna and flora, and with all creation in general. So the teaching is actually an instruction manual that requires no more and no less than that the human being who follows the guide and follows the instructions takes everything into his own hands, learns and molds everything within himself for the best and the good. In this respect, human beings on earth have been kept ignorant since time immemorial by religions, sects, religious philosophies, and rulers of all kinds, as a result of which they have always humbled themselves and been unable to become themselves. The knowledge of spiritual teachings or any other spiritual knowledge was even forbidden to ordinary citizens under penalty of death, which is why it was also considered secret knowledge. For this reason, countless human beings from time immemorial and even today are still cowering and also do not dare to openly express their own opinions in order to emphasize what moves them deeply in their needs, thoughts, feelings, and desires. However, remedying this earth's humanity is, among many other things, the task of spiritual teaching, which is spread worldwide through the books and writings of Billy Edgeworth Albert Meier, what if Beachamt, through which the human beings of earth are to be enlightened in a humble wise and without a missionary form coming to light, as is the case with religions and sects as well as religious philosophies, whereby a conviction of having to believe occurs in human beings and chains them into dependence and bondage to a belief.
Question. But human beings have been enlightened since Immanuel Kant coined the slogan Sapere Aude.
That should be enough, shouldn't it?
Answer. Exactly, that is not the case, that it is enough, because basically time does not stand still for human beings and the world. Consequently, it continues to run just like all progress and evolution. However, this also applies to knowledge in every respect, which must be constantly expanded with all innovations, also in connection with the overall development of the world of thought, feeling, psyche, and consciousness, as well as the behavior of human beings. Since time immemorial, man has generally not learnt to shape himself in this respect in an absolutely conscious way, but only lives into the day and performs according to what he has been brought into life through education and what he has unconsciously acquired himself, but without thinking that he should also educate himself in an absolutely conscious way and make himself a truly viable human being. Everyone believes that they are the greatest and the best, and that they have learnt everything that is necessary and important for their life, but it does not even occur to them that they must fundamentally shape their inner and outer being to be a true human being and compassionate towards fellow human beings, nature and its fauna and flora, and therefore also towards all life forms. For this reason, it also does not occur to him to consciously take appropriate responsibility for his own life and existence, as well as for his actions and behavior, and towards his fellow human beings and the environment as a whole. He therefore also turns to religions, sects, and false religious philosophies, on whose imaginary deities he places all responsibility in order not to have to bear it himself and to be able to act irresponsibly in disharmony, jealousy, discord, strife, hatred, and all kinds of other degeneracy. It can therefore in no wise be enough, and human beings are also not enlightened by it, that Immanuel Kant is said to have uttered the motto sapere aude, which does not correspond to the truth anyway, because the Latin saying sapere audi did become known through the philosopher Kant, who declared the phrase to be the motto of the Enlightenment in his essay, What is Enlightenment? He translated the words as, have the courage to use your own reason. But according to Pleyar and language experts, sapere aude means dare to exercise reason in literal German translation, as Billy Edward Albert Meier stated in the small pamphlet Sapere aude written by him. If these words are primarily associated with Kant, however, they do not go back to him and are therefore wrongly attributed to him, as the saying actually goes back to the ancient poet Horace, whose name was actually Quintus Horatius Flaccus, born 65 BC, 8 BC, and who, along with Virgil, Properce, Tibullus, and Ovid, is considered one of the most important poets of the Augustan age. At first he wrote numerous odes, but from 20 BC he devoted himself primarily to the first book of the Epistulae, the so-called epistles, that is to say, the epistolary poems in hexameters. Hexameter, Greek hexametron, literally 6 measures, is the classic verse measure of epic poetry, in which the saying sapere aude is also included. Unfortunately, there are thousands of religions, sects, and false religious philosophies on earth that are so contrary to the reality of reality and its truth that the majority of earth humans are completely confused and have fallen prey to the beliefs of one faith or another. So there is a need for a counterpole with a massive boost of enlightenment that is founded in reality and its effective and irrefutable truth, whereby it must be clear that provable truth can always and in every case only ever emerge from the reality of provable reality, namely as relatively absolute knowledge and as absolute certainty, but never as faith. Belief is never based on truth, but always on unprovable fears, assumptions, needs, apprehensions, expectations, hopes, hypotheses, conjectures, insinuations and suppositions that cannot be proven as truth, as is the case with the false teachings of religions and religious sects, but also with those many philosophies that are religiously false, misleading or otherwise dubious, as they were misled in ancient times by extraterrestrials who came to earth and glorified themselves here as gods. So the religions and sects and various false religious sect-related philosophies that human beings on earth have are based on the worship of gods, which came about through extraterrestrials in the form that they were worshipped as gods by the earthlings, which led them away from the belief in nature, in respect of which they had regarded natural beings and natural forms of all kinds as deities and worshipped them. And if it had not been for earthly people who had distinguished themselves as founders of religions and sects, and who had posed as cult priests and representatives of the deities, etc., and had deliberately and deceitfully misled human beings with their empty phrases and invented stories of deities, angels, heaven and saints, Then no religions and sects would have come into being, but human beings would have developed in terms of their thoughts, their psychology, and their consciousness, and thus in terms of the whole of creation and nature. As a result, no problems of faith, religion, and sex would have arisen, as has been the case since the existence of religions, sects, and religiously false philosophies, and through many religious wars and the Christian Inquisition since time immemorial. Earth's humanity would have developed completely normally and without religions. Sects and false, misleading philosophies would be devoted to peace, freedom, and harmony, and would know neither wars, terrorism, nor racial hatred.
Question. It is said that Billy Meier is the only one who is in contact with the Pleiaren, that is to say, the extraterrestrials. How can that be?
Answer. That is of course correct. But there are certain reasons for this, in that the Pleiaren are much more advanced, that is to say, evolutionized in every mental wise compared to the human beings of Earth, and are therefore susceptible, sensitive, and endangered in this respect compared to the low overall evolution of Earth's humanity. It should therefore be borne in mind that the Pleiaren are more advanced or more highly evolved as a result of their consciousness and mental development between 25 and 30 million years ago. For them, this means that they are accordingly much more sensitive than human beings here on Earth in terms of their thoughts, feelings, psyche, and consciousness, which is why it is very dangerous for them to enter the Earth's human mental vibration range, which unfortunately did happen once in an incident at the center. This means that Billy must be able to control his entire mental vibration in order to be able to make direct personal and telepathic contact with the Pleiaren in an absolutely balanced mental state. This is the only way a connection can be established and maintained. In this respect, however, Billy Edward Albert Meier is the only human being on Earth who is capable of this, which is why he alone is able to maintain contact with the Pleiaren. However, the fact that he has the ability to do so is not simple, as it is based on his mission to fulfill as a herald and teacher by teaching the spiritual doctrine. The circumstances and prerequisites for his ability and suitability to maintain contact with the extraterrestrials were and are manifold and necessary, because only through these was it possible for him to control his entire mental vibration in such a way that he can maintain contact with the Pleiaren. However, Billy is not a superman because of this, but a simple and modest human being who does not make a fuss about himself, does not allow himself to be admired or praised, and also does not allow himself to be judged as something special. Exactly these facts also prove that others, who supposedly want to be in contact with the Pleiaren, only indulge in fibs, lies, and swindles because they want to be admired and put on an elevated pedestal, and also want to earn prestige and money with their stories. However, it is also often the case that such male and female alleged contacts are fraudulent, addicted to prestige, selfish, or delusional. Others fall for deceptions or are so self-deceived as a result of esoteric, religious, or other forms of belief that they fall for self-created illusions, delusions, and visions.
Question. If FIGU strongly criticizes world religions, cults, and various religiously influenced philosophies, is not FIGU in principle the same thing?
Answer. This is wrong to assume, because unlike religions, their sects and religious philosophies, the teaching of the FIGU, the teaching of truth, teaching of the spirit, teaching of life, is not faith-based in any wise, so it can neither be compared to nor equated with world religions, sects, and religion-based philosophies. Therefore, if a comparison absolutely had to be made, then it could only be in the wise way of life training, life-shaping training and life management training, whereby valuable attitudes to life are built up and learned, which lead to very considerable life experiences and their beneficial life experience. And unlike religions, sects and religious philosophies, the teaching of FIGU, which Billy Meier teaches, is not dependent on any belief, but is characterized solely by the reality of reality and its irrefutable truth. For this reason, FIGU also does not try to convince human beings of any vague stories about God, angels, saints, and holy spirits, and other erroneous and illusionary fantasy stories, but rather to teach them that the only way to correctness is to endeavor to achieve absolute certainty about reality and its effective, irrefutable truth. To this end, only the necessary information is provided in books, writings, and on the internet, and lectures and information stands are also organized. The lectures, information stands, and internet pages are well attended, and the information is absorbed, studied, and learnt. And everything is done by those interested at their own discretion, without proselytizing, but effectively as free informative factors that can be absorbed, studied, and learned by human beings at their own will, without coercive influence, according to their own interests. So FIGU does not approach people in order to proselytize them, because FIGU members only approach fellow human beings when they approach the information stands and address the stand operators directly and out of their own need, interest, and desire.
Question. The FIGU members are convinced of their spiritual teaching, which Billy Meier brings as a herald, and to which the FIGU says that it has the truth about life from this teaching. Then why doesn't it approach people more proactively?
Answer. That FIGU has the truth about life is effectively only relative. Hence, neither Billy Meier nor FIGU and its members would claim that they alone know or have the effective truth regarding life, or in any other wise. Life and existence harbor such a tremendous amount of unknowns that it is absolutely impossible for human beings to know the ultimate truth about anything. This is simply impossible when the almost infinite nature of the entire universe and all things and factors are considered, which are present in such abundance for human beings that they can never be surveyed, grasped, fathomed, and understood by them. It would therefore correspond to a shameful presumption on the part of the FIGU members and Billy to claim to have the sole or also only general truth with regard to life, or even the sole whole truth. As a matter of principle, FIGU and all its members, as well as Billy Eduard Albert Meier as a simple core group member of the statutory association FIGU, distance themselves from such a claim. And the fact that FIGU and all its members do not approach people more aggressively to spread the FIGU teachings and gather followers or believers through fibbing, persuasion, and empty, misleading, and confused promises is answered by the fact that FIGU and FIGU members are not proselytizing and also do not do any persuasion work, as is inherent in religions, sects, and religion-related philosophies.
Question. Are there no doubts among FIGU members with regard to spiritual teaching, etc.?
Answer. It cannot be spoken of in terms of doubts if any questions arise, which in any case are dealt with in a very detailed and explanatory wise, and everything is clarified, because no questions remain unanswered and unanswered. This is because everything is explained down to the last detail until the whole thing is also reasonably and satisfactorily analyzed, explained and understood, which of course every human being must then reflect on for themselves, and after mature, strenuous, and fruitful thought, come to the correct result and the certainty of the correctness of the whole. In principle, no results are mentioned, because the teaching requires that human beings themselves search for them and reach the goal of what must be worked out independently as an effect, result, success, solution, and impact. It is wrong to assume that doubts are necessary and important, but on the contrary, critical questions that lead to a matter being addressed and clarified and explained in detail to the best of one's conscience, ability, and capacity. Critical human beings inevitably have questions that need to be explained and also answered in detail. Only people who are hopelessly addicted to fanaticism, faith, or obedience in relation to something, such as a faith, religion, sect, religious philosophy, or human beings, have no questions and believe everything they are told to believe without hesitation or question. And human beings who are addicted to a cause in this wise are usually the ones who harbor suspicions and doubts about the effective truth that emerges from the reality of reality. However, since FIGU members endeavor to the best of their conscience and knowledge to use their brain and reason, that is to say, their intellect and rationality to learn, study and question all the information they receive in order to find out the effective truth. They do not struggle with doubts, but seek truthful answers by asking questions in order to progress in life in an evolution of consciousness and gain self-confidence in order to progress in inner freedom and harmony and in inner peace.
Question: Freedom. How is this in the FIGU? In one bulletin there is talk of countless commandments. Is this not a clear contradiction to freedom?
Answer: This question states that on the one hand the term commandments and on the other hand also the term freedom are not understood. A commandment is not a law, because it is a good advisory recommendation that may or may not be followed in order to do something correctly, thereby avoiding harm, etc. A commandment does not demand any kind of freedom. A commandment, therefore, does not demand anything of human beings in any wise, but only recommends that they decide for themselves what to do or not to do for the sake of what is best, good, positive, and to their own advantage, and to do what is correct. And this can be done in the right or wrong, that is to say, in a positive or negative way, in order to gain something valuable from it or to be prepared for something disadvantageous. And in order to act in a good or negative way, every human being must decide for themselves of their own free will, meaning that they are given the freedom to do so and are not restricted in any wise. In this sense, freedom is a state in which the human being is absolutely free from certain personal or social ties or obligations that are perceived as coercive or burdensome, etc. So also with regard to following or not following counseling commandments, that is to say, recommendations that they are truthful. Consequently, commandments cannot be regarded as demanding laws, but really only as an offer, that is to say, a recommendation for advice that does not have to be followed in any wise, but can be followed or rejected on a voluntary and free basis. Thus, with regard to commandments, that is to say, recommendations, that is to say, advice, the human being is not restricted in his own free decision, but is completely independent and unbound, which allows him to decide and act freely and unhindered in a non-captive right to determine and do something at his own discretion. In this sense, commandments mean that human beings are completely self-sufficient in their handling and execution, and thus self-determining as to whether they want to fulfill or reject commandments, for which they must also bear responsibility, regardless of whether the result is positive or negative. And that this is indeed the case is proven by the laws and commandments of nature, whereby the laws, in accordance with causality, give compelling processes and consequences, while the commandments show what should be done correctly in order to achieve good and positive things, but that something bad and negative comes out of something if it is done wrongly and incorrectly. And if these natural laws and commandments are transferred by extension to families, groups, associations, and organizations of human beings, then, in order to guarantee and maintain order, laws and commandments and guiding regulations, etc., must inevitably also be created or given, which therefore also requires the FIGU to fit into an order that is given by statutes, bylaws, and structures. Only through fixed and just regulations, and thus through laws, commandments and ordinances, etc., is it possible for an order to be given and maintained that is to be followed at the voluntary discretion and free decision of human beings in order to ensure peace, harmony, and progress. And only when order functions can everything function correctly, be it in relation to a family, acquaintance, or friendship, a club, or an organization, etc., because without a certain order, disorder is bound to develop. However, any order that is freely followed is based on freedom, peace, and harmony, just as nature and its fauna and flora can develop and exist freely according to the creative natural laws and commandments. And only when human beings break the creative natural laws and commandments, for example by spreading poisons in nature and causing destruction in it, sowing hatred, waging wars and terror, etc., do they lose their freedom, peace, and harmony, and are destroyed through their own fault.
Question. Do all FIGU core group members hold honorary positions?
Answer. This is correct, because every FIGU core group member, as well as every passive group member, works voluntarily for the mission and its dissemination, be it by lending a personal hand with work or in the form of an annual contribution for membership and the maintenance of the center and the mission. The main tasks and main work, such as the production of the 3-monthly magazine Vasa Manzeit, the creation, production and distribution of books, writings, and other materials, are the responsibility of the core group members, just as the bookkeeping, official and tax matters, and the entire administration of the Mother Center are also handled and carried out by the members of the core group, as is the management of the FIGU national, study and interest groups in various countries.
Question. Isn't there a danger in FIGU of individual members making a fist of things?
Answer. In the FIGU, there is also freedom of opinion and personal freedom of action, although personalities remain absolutely personal. In addition, the voting rules in the FIGU are such that decisions of any kind can only be adopted and enforced unanimously. If a core group member is not in agreement with something, they can veto it at any time and demand explanations. However, if a member is not prepared to vote in favor despite explanations, the matter is not put to a vote and may be brought up again at a later date if the member in question is of a different mind. So there is no reason for a core group member to make a fist of it. And should it be the case that a member cannot agree with something that falls within any of FIGU's areas of management, then everyone is free to terminate their FIGU membership at their own discretion and will and leave the association. As a rule, this is especially the case, which can actually happen, if a member sets himself above the other members, wants to command them and rule over them, which of course is not allowed according to FIGU rules, because commanding is not permitted in the association precisely because everything must be done, carried out and completed voluntarily, and thus without coercion. However, if this is violated, it is not acceptable. This also means that every FIGU member has the same rights and that there is no hierarchy, but absolute equality and equal rights, both with regard to the female and male gender and to all tasks and work. It goes without saying that members are also assigned to tasks and work specifically according to their abilities and wishes.
Question. In what way does a member of FIGU behave differently in everyday life?
Answer. Through the teaching of the Spirit, that is to say, the teaching of truth, teaching of the Spirit, teaching of life. Human beings learn to guide their lives in the correct direction, to get to know themselves, to recognize their own mistakes and weaknesses, as well as to become aware of them in the area of education and to change everything for the better and the good. Recognizing and correcting one's own character and personality deficits automatically has an effect on one's inner and outer being, and thus also on behavior, which is increasingly consciously controlled and improved. This results in a general mental, rational, intellectual, thought, feeling, psychic, conscious, and progressive evolutionary change, which changes, renews, and develops the overall character and personality picture, and creates a better way of shaping, leading, and orienting life. As a result, the inner and outer being changes, transforms, and becomes more valuable through the reorientation and reshaping of thoughts and feelings over the years, whereby a new and consciously better behavior is also carried over into everyday life and determines this and its course more freely, openly, peacefully, and harmoniously. So there is also a better engagement with everyday life itself, as well as with fellow human beings.
Question. And why exactly do we need the extraterrestrials now?
Answer. The extraterrestrials, that is to say the Pleiaren, are not needed for the mission, for its processing by Billy Edward Albert Meier, and for its dissemination. Because firstly, from the very beginning of the contacts with Billy Meier, they only took on the role of an introduction, that is to say an opening and an introductory factor to make the world public aware and to shake it out of its twilight state of disinterest, indifference, carelessness, and unconcern, etc. This was associated with an anticipated worldwide controversy, which found its way into the world media as the Billy Meier case, that is to say, Billy Meier case. In order to make Billy Edward Albert Meier and its mission and teaching known worldwide, namely by arousing the interest of human beings on earth in the teaching of truth, teaching of the spirit, teaching of life, via ufology, which has resulted in it being disseminated worldwide since 1975. And secondly, there was also a reason for the appearance of the Pleiaren to show that a UFO crash actually took place in Roswell, USA, on 4th July 1947, through which the Polish-American sausage salesman George Adamski then sensed an opportunity. From 1952, with fake photos and untrue UFO stories, to appear as a contactee with an alleged Venusian named Kalner, and to travel the world with his invented story at the expense of his believers, of course. Over the next 5 decades, the Adamski hoaxes gave rise to a veritable worldwide UFO boom, with dozens and even hundreds of alleged UFO contactees and diffuse, manipulated evidence photos. Interestingly, these contactees, their photos and stories were practically all treated as real and true, while Billy Meier was called a UFO fraudster and UFO swindler, just as his world's best UFO or blasting ship pictures were also described as fakes, but were judged to be genuine and real by effective experts after precise analyses. It was therefore important for the Pleiaren to clarify and bring to light the falsities of the generally falsified ufology stories regarding alleged contacts with extraterrestrials, which is why the worldwide controversy surrounding Billy Edward Albert Meier was deliberately created, whereby various alleged UFO contactees of both sexes have since been exposed as frauds, charlatans, and swindlers. And this has been particularly true since the worldwide flourishing of the ufology wave with its hoaxes, faked images, and invented contact stories relating to extraterrestrials ceased to boom and became largely uninteresting to the world public, with a few UFO exceptions that made headlines worldwide in England, the USA and Belgium, etc. And as far as the appearance of the Pleiaren in direct connection with Billy Edward Albert Meier is concerned, this has nothing to do with the fact that the contacts are needed, because they are basically based on pure friendship between the Pleiaren and Billy, which is also cultivated with hundreds of official contact conversations in person, which are later telepathically retrieved and written down verbatim. And since Billy Meier can also retrieve and record the teaching of truth, teaching of the spirit, teaching of life from the planetary and cosmic memory banks, without the extraterrestrials, that is to say, the Pleiaren, as this teaching has been stored in them since time immemorial and was also taught by all the ancient prophets, no extraterrestrials are needed for this. The teaching itself has been taught on Earth since time immemorial, but it has been maliciously distorted by scribblers for personal gain and purposes, giving rise to false religions and sects as well as religious philosophies which have ensnared, exploited, and enslaved human beings, which also continues to happen today. Although extraterrestrials were basically the origin of the Earthlings appointing them as gods, the actual religions, sects, and religious philosophies that exist on Earth today and harass their believers with their delusions of faith and make them hopelessly enslaved and exploited in various forms. This can only be traced back to illusory and misleading, as well as to confused delusional imaginations, and delusions as well as to the lust for power of earthly human beings who arrogantly and powerfully put themselves in the forefront as priests, messengers of God, representatives of God and the like, with religious delusions and sectarian devotional excesses, or who consciously mislead their fellow human beings in a religiously hegemonic and selfish manner. And to bring this to the human beings of Earth in an understandable and enlightening way is another task of the FIGU, which is an independent association and is not under the dictate of the extraterrestrials of the Pleiaren. Consequently, these are also not needed in relation to the task mentioned.
Question: what is wrong with religions?
Answer: their false teachings do not correspond to the reality of reality and not its truth. For they claim that the universal physical power of creation, which exists as a spiritual energetic form, corresponds to a deity that must be worshipped and through which the destinies of human beings and the earth are determined. This God is omnipotent, that is to say, absolute, omnipotent, unrestricted, omnipotent, and autocratic, and human beings are obliged to him in every respect, because he, God, is the Lord who is above life and death, above all existence, and above everything that is and is not. He is to be obeyed unconditionally, and if this is not done and his commands are violated, then he enacts punitive measures on the sinners in order to bring them onto the right path. But this corresponds to a delusional representation of pure Earth's humanity, exactly the way human beings think and act, who think and act in this wise and are therefore unfree, dictating over their fellow human beings, harassing them, oppressing them, and ruling over them in order to exploit them in every conceivable way on the one hand, and to restrict their freedom and deny them peace and harmony on the other. With the rise of religions, sects, and religious philosophies, the whole world of thought, feeling, and psyche of human beings has been poisoned in the aforementioned religious sectarian manner, as a result of which they have become dependent on religious sectarian beliefs and even enslaved to them. The consequence of this, however, is that in general every human being who believes in religion, sects, and God is no longer even the least bit himself, but is dependent on what he erroneously hopes and expects and desires from his imaginary God through begging, humble prayers, which he will never receive from his divine Lord because he does not exist, but only corresponds to a humanly delusional illusion. However, if it does happen that things are fulfilled that are begged for through prayer, then the fulfillment occurs either solely because the praying and begging human being unconsciously endeavors to achieve the whole thing himself and brings it about through his own powers, or, on the other hand, it results from some barely or not at all transparent coincidences in which his own and external forces of fellow human beings and the environment play a part. Religiously devout human beings, however, do not think about the matter in this respect, but humbly and prayerfully attribute everything to their imaginary God as an effect and fulfillment of prayer. In this wise, religious belief has eaten into their brains to such an extent that they give up on themselves and only hope for everything and anything by the grace of God, because the whole thing has crept into their genetics as a delusion of belief in God and is passed down through generations in the temporal lobe. So it is an inevitable consequence that the whole thing has a malignant negative effect on the consciousness as well as on the thought-feeling psychological world, which can only be transformed back into the normality of correctness and thus into the reality of reality and its truth through a clear mind and profound reason, and also only if human beings turn to these values again. However, this cannot happen through a new religion, sect, or religious philosophy, but effectively only by recognizing, understanding, and accepting the reality of reality and its truth. For the majority of human beings on Earth, it seems obvious that there must be a God, or perhaps even gods or idols, because they can only explain the fact that the universe, the world, the fauna and flora, and therefore also themselves, came into existence. Perhaps he simply believes in it because his parents, relatives, religious teachers, philosophers or theologians have taught and hammered into him the belief in a God and claimed that there are valid reasons for a God creator, why human beings should believe in a God creator, in gods or in idols. But whatever the case, all deity stories are based on some kind of false doctrine and false evidence for the existence of God, because there is no God and therefore no God creator, just as there are no other gods or idols through whom the universe, all life and all existence would have been created. In 2016, in the Christian calendar, there are more than 8.5 billion human beings who profess one of the 6 world religions or a sect that has emerged from them, whereby God has many faces in relation to religions and sects. For Christians, Jews, and Muslims, he is a personal and universal creator God who is said to have created the world, the heavens, and the universe out of chaos. Human beings are seen as the pinnacle of God's creation and are promised a paradisiacal coexistence between man and God at the end of their lives, that is to say, at death. The religions of Asia, on the other hand, do not recognize the face of a god or a person, but rather a divine principle, a world soul that is said to be all-hearing, all-seeing, and all-understanding, and to work through the entire universe. In other words, a form that can be compared in a wise way to the existence of universal creation energy, out of which the universe and everything that exists in it came into being through spiritual physical forces. However, this does not mean that the religious teachings of the Asian religions can be harmonized with the teaching of the Spirit through this approximate comparison, because these religions are also far removed from the natural teaching of truth, teaching of the Spirit, teaching of life. Christians pray to Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and God the Father. Muslims pray to Allah. Jews follow the commandments of the Torah, or others strive for an end to their rebirths. Many go on pilgrimage to Jerusalem and Bethlehem, others to the Kaaba in Mecca, or to Mount Kailash in Tibet, etc., and all those who have fallen into a faith long for heavenly peace, freedom, happiness, harmony, and contentment, regardless of how these values may come about, even if it is through a holy war, terror, bloody judgment, torture, murder, revenge, retribution, and hatred. The triumph of science and the realization that everything in existence can also be explained physically, including all those things that are falsely described as supernatural and supersensible, has not changed this. And it has also not changed the fact that human beings on Earth are absolutely responsible in every respect for everything and anything they do. He alone is responsible for everything, such as his life, his health, and his entire fate. Consequently, he also does everything and anything that affects him, for it is solely his own thoughts, feelings, actions, and deeds that determine how and what happens to him. However, human beings do not want to recognize or admit this, which is why they cling desperately to their confused religious beliefs, to their delusional belief in false religious teachings, in one God, several gods or idols, etc., because they simply want to have a higher might above them that relieves them of all responsibility, which is no easier than by adhering to a delusional belief in an all-determining deity that is responsible for everything. In this delusional belief, everything that cannot be explained rationally due to ignorance is also believed to be supernatural and supernatural, while those who can explain these things are dismissed as liars, frauds, and charlatans. Thus, human beings on Earth are still searching for the reality of reality and the truth that emerges from it, as well as for the meaning of life, because they do not want to be instructed by the effective, creative, natural truth, but want to be delusional, in a time of great enlightenment and enlightenment. And since he does not want to be instructed by the effective truth that emerges from the reality of reality, he still wanders around disorientated in a chaos of faith and in a divine disorder, as in Abraham's time. It is therefore necessary that the effective truth regarding the religious delusion is made known to human beings on earth, which cannot be done by a new religion, but simply by bringing the neutral teaching of truth, teaching of the Spirit, teaching of life, that is to say, the teaching of the Spirit. Human beings must be gently made aware of the effective truth without coercion, and thus without proselytizing, which in any case emerges solely from the reality of reality, and cannot be disputed one iota, because the truth is absolutely always reality-based, and can only be proven in this wise. So, a gentle enlightenment is necessary, whereby the fact of the existence of extraterrestrials, that is to say the Pleiaren and the contacts with them, can be very helpful as a hanger and warning call, etc. But they are not needed to confirm the doctrine of truth, to spread it or to contribute to it in any other way. Basically, human beings have to nudge themselves in the correct direction without the direct help of the extraterrestrials. Human beings must learn to think for themselves and begin to turn towards the reality of reality and its truth, so that they can finally become realistic in order to develop in life as a true human being and progress in terms of consciousness, and thus create peace, freedom, and harmony within themselves and in the near and far environment. And only then, when the individual acts in this wise way and also passes everything on, does something like the principle of a snowball fight arise from this, whereby everything spreads beneficially and an all-round improvement occurs in relation to all things.
Question: how does FIGU know all this?
Answer: on the one hand, all FIGU members have their eyes open and use all their senses to perceive as much as possible of world events in relation to secret services, climate, natural disasters, politics, religions, sectarianism, terrorism, weather and society, etc., to analyze everything, think about it, and draw conclusions about what will develop and ultimately result from it in the future. On the other hand, Billy, Edward Albert Meier, and the Pleiaren conduct many detailed and valuable conversations on all conceivable topics, which are very instructive and far-reaching, are recorded verbatim in writing, and reveal facts that go far beyond a comprehensive good general education, and are also provable in their content. As a result, FIGU and FIGU members have at their disposal far-reaching information and teaching and learning materials that cannot be published by schools, television, journals, newspapers, radio, or other media, and brought to the attention of interested human beings.
Question: the English physicist Stephen Hawking spent $100 million on research into extraterrestrial life. Research into extraterrestrial life. Why doesn't FIGU tell him that it has already found something?
Answer: On the one hand, it is not the task of FIGU and FIGU members to contact and instruct terrestrial astrophysicists, such as the theoretical physicist and astrophysicist Stephen Hawking, regarding the existence of extraterrestrial life, and specifically regarding the Pleiaren, because the Pleiarenian directives would also prohibit personal contact with terrestrial scientists and governments. Although an attempt at contact was made once, namely with the US government, such impossible and deterrent demands were made by a CIA intermediary for the Pleiaren that it was decided for all time not to seek any further contact or connection with earthly state powers. And in order to make contact with earthly scientists, technicians, and state powers, this would only have been possible under exclusion of the public and under absolute security measures for the Pleiaren, and also only on the condition that the advanced, futuristic technology would not have been placed in the hands of the Earthlings. Thus, in the attempt to establish contact with the USA, if effective contact had been established, it was also only intended to give advice, firstly, to create a sufficiently globalized pacification and freedom, and secondly, to impart medical knowledge, and so on. On the other hand, it should be borne in mind that the Pleiaren are far superior to human beings on Earth in terms of consciousness development in all matters and things, and also in terms of their technology, which enables them to come to Earth. From the 20th century onwards, the Pleiaren provided earthly scientists with what was responsible in terms of information regarding technology and electronics, etc., through unconscious development impulses, as a result of which immense inventions and progress in every form of technology and electronics were made very quickly and in a very short time. If this had not been the case, then today's electronics, medicine, and technology would not even be at the beginning of development, let alone in its later infancy, as is currently the case.
Question. The books and writings of the FIGU, who writes them and what is their scope?
Answer. The main writing work is done by Billy Meier, as a result of which he has so far written some 60 very valuable books on the teaching of truth, teaching of the spirit, teaching of life, as well as in the form of the contact conversations, etc. There is also a photo volume of his work. There is also a photo volume of his rayship pictures, as well as aphorisms, poems, and hundreds of articles published in the 3-monthly magazine Wasser Mannzeit, as well as in books and in many bulletins, etc. But it is also the FIGU members who display their writing talent and write countless articles, etc., as well as writing and authoring books, such as Guido Moosbrugger, died 2014, Bernadette Brand and H.G. Lanzendorfer, while Eva Bieri collects further sayings, poems and aphorisms which Billy writes on an ongoing basis and which are to be published in another volume after his death. All in all, there are currently around 50,000 pages of written material, A4 and A5 size, which Billy Edward Albert Meier alone has brought to the human beings of Earth, and which can hardly be comprehensively and profoundly processed in just one human being's lifetime.
Question. Doesn't this huge volume of books and written material have a deterrent effect on human beings?
Answer. The whole thing is certainly not off-putting, because all the written material is written and organized in such a way that each book and each article is self-contained, so that individual works can also be read, studied, and understood, and that also across the entire substance of the teaching of the Spirit, that is to say, the teaching of truth, teaching of the Spirit, teaching of life. In the whole, there are some main works which, when read and studied, also provide a foundation of great knowledge, while other works are specializations in certain sub-areas, but which in any case relate to life and spiritual knowledge as well as to the factors of consciousness, the worldly, character, and personality, as well as to the development of behavior and everything that relates to the world of thoughts, feelings, and the psyche.
Question. What happens to the FIGU when Billy Meier dies?
Answer. When Billy is no more and has taken his leave on Earth, that is to say, when he has gone his last way, then the overall core group under the leadership of the board administration of the Mother Center, SIM, ja, say, Silver Star Center, hinter Schmidt-Rüti 1225 8495 Schmidt-Rüti, Switzerland, takes over the management of FIGU, as well as also the supervision of all further FIGU groupings of any form branching out worldwide, in accordance with the association statutes and association bylaws.
Question. How will contact with the Plejaren be maintained after Billy Meier's death, even if the Plejaren's mission is not completed? Or will a new contact person come?
Answer. It is certain from the very beginning of the contacts that, on the one hand, the Plejaren will withdraw from the earthly realm for good when other extraterrestrials come to Earth and officially make contact and liaise with the earthly governments and earthly humanity. On the other hand, they will also finally withdraw from Earth when Billy Eduard Albert Meier dies. In truth,
After completing their first task, which was to
publicize the contacts and the mission worldwide through their appearance, they have only been here since then as a result of the deep mutual friendship between them and Billy. And when he leaves, there is also no new contact person to continue the contacts. Their task was already finished when the worldwide controversy surrounding the contacts between them and Billy Meier had borne the necessary fruit, so since then there has been nothing more for them to do in connection with the mission. And if they are still concerned today about the events taking place on Earth, then they are doing so solely for their own interest and for the sake of their studies, etc.
Question. Doesn't that contradict the basic idea of destroying religions?
Answer. It has never been implied, said, or contemplated by FIGU, Billy Eduard Albert Meier, or FIGU members, to destroy religions on Earth. It is therefore neither in the interest nor in the duty of FIGU or FIGU members, including Billy, to wage a destructive war against religions, sects, and religious philosophies. Overall, the task of FIGU and all its members is solely to work in an enlightening and non-proselytizing way in the sense of the mission, that is to say, within the framework of the teaching of truth, teaching of the Spirit, teaching of life. And if human beings on Earth take an interest in the teaching or even turn to it in a learning and studying way, then they do so uninfluenced by indoctrination and persuasion, but out of their own free will and intellect, out of their own reason and determination to find the effective truth that can only emerge from the reality of reality. This is precisely because there can simply be no other truth than that which is given by the reality of reality. Everything else corresponds only to a belief that can never be proven as reality and actuality.
Question. Keyword imposter. Billy Meier has accused other contact people of the Plejaren of being imposters. Why isn't he the fraudster? Why aren't all contactees fraudsters?
Answer. It was not Billy Meier who labeled so-called contactees as frauds in relation to alleged contacts with the Plejaren, but it was the Plejaren themselves who made it clear that, apart from Billy Eduard Albert Meier, they do not maintain any contacts in personality or telepathic form with human beings on Earth, and also not through the inane, idiotically claimed functioning of so-called channeling. From the very beginning, the Plejaren have distanced themselves from the fraudulent and lying claims of alleged contacts with Earthlings, which they clearly explained to Billy Eduard Albert Meier with the request to also publicize this worldwide, thus acting on behalf of the Plejaren. And this was also the case with regard to the whole contactee system around the world, as masses of female and male personalities claimed that they were in contact with extraterrestrials from various star formations for some banal reason, which was usually religious and sectarian. Correctly. Of course, the Pleiaren clarified all these claims over the years from 1975 to the present and established that all alleged contacts with other extraterrestrials corresponded to hoaxes, lies, frauds, and charlatanism just as much as the claims concerning them, the Pleiaren. At the beginning of the contacts between Billy Edward Albert Meier and the Pleiaren, the Pleiades in the constellation of Taurus were deliberately falsely named as the place of origin of the Pleiaren, because it was foreseen that after Billy became known worldwide with his contacts, many fraudulent, glory-seeking and selfish earthlings of both sexes would then claim that they were in personality or telepathic contact with the Pleiadians. And this is exactly what also happened, so the Pleiaren officially let the cat out of the bag when the climax of the contact lie was reached. Consequently, their effective origin was correctly named, namely not the Pleiades in the constellation Taurus, but the Pleiaren, which exist in a different space-time continuum and are around 500 light-years away from Earth. The distance of a light year is determined by the light that is travelled in 1 year and is used as a unit of measurement for distances in space. A light year is therefore the distance travelled by an electromagnetic wave, such as light, in 1 light-second Els, which corresponds to a distance of 29792.458 kilometers per second. And that Billy Edward Albert Meier is not one of the fraudsters, swindlers and charlatans mentioned in the matter of alleged UFO contacts, that is to say, contacts with extraterrestrials, has been proven more than 100 times by witnesses who have seen and heard him speak with their own eyes, together with extraterrestrials, and have also seen and photographed the Pleiaren beamship C witness book. In addition, the beamship photos that Billy took have been analyzed and closely examined by experts who have come to the conclusion that they are genuine. Various U.S. studies have also now proven the authenticity of the Billy Edward Albert Meier Pleiaren contacts, which are now summarized in a book. So the results of the studies say that everything really is as Billy Meier says.
Question. Overpopulation is a very important issue for the FIGU. Why is that?
Answer. Due to all the criminal and irresponsible degenerations and machinations of overpopulation, which continues to grow unstoppably with its current 2016, more than 8.6 billion human beings, not only are the climate, nature and its fauna and flora being destroyed and their countless lives wiped out, destroyed and annihilated, but on the whole also everything that concerns the necessary basis of life for all life forms. Consequently, slowly but surely, everything that is also vital for the continued existence of earthly humanity is also being destroyed and annihilated. Whereas in 1978 there were 4 billion people on Earth, in the second decade of the third millennium this figure has now risen to more than 8.6 billion, which is already very close to what the Earth is, fundamentally and naturally able to support within a normal and healthy framework, and can feed human beings without the need to produce more food through human machinations and interventions in nature, the rape and depletion of nature, and without even a single human being having to suffer from hunger. But the Earthlings don't care. No, because those responsible in the governments trivialize the whole thing and use their statistics to lie about more than 1 billion human beings away from those who effectively populate the world. So they talk about only 7 billion inhabitants of the Earth. In truth, Earth is a planet, and a marvelous one at that could support and feed 529 million human beings with all the trimmings and without any problems whatsoever. However, human beings have created a huge overpopulation and continue to drive it upwards. which has forced them for decades and also continues to force all food plants and various animal species to supernatural heights through chemistry, genetic manipulation, and new breeding. But that is not all, because the growing overpopulation means that the exploitation of land and soil of all other kinds, including the exploitation of raw materials, must also continue to be driven forward on an immense scale in order to meet the inexorably increasing demand for all substances. But this is becoming less and less successful as time goes on. The fact that the destruction of usable land is also being driven forward by the madness of overpopulation, as well as by chemicals and the expansion of living space, etc., is something that no one openly talks about, just as little as the fact that many foods to be consumed by human beings are contaminated with poisons and chemicals and are slowly but surely poisoning humanity as a whole, whereby even the majority of foods now consist only of chemicals. Originally, there were only just as many human beings living in each individual region of the Earth as the area in question was naturally able to feed. Chemicals and other poisons, genetic manipulation, and the breeding of new plants, and the most intensive exploitation of the soil were still completely unknown, as was the destruction of the climate, nature, its fauna and flora, and the extermination of thousands of life forms such as plants, animals, beasts, birds, amphibians and reptiles, etc. This quickly changed, however. This changed rapidly when, during the Middle Ages, especially at the time of the Great French Revolution, the crazy idea arose that there had to be a great many more human beings if people were to rebel against the authorities in order to overthrow them, which is why the people incited each other to produce offspring in order to become mighty and powerful. However, Christianity with its religion and sects was particularly involved in this, with Catholicism in particular, but also other religions, which preached as powerfully as ever through their insane teachings. Go forth and multiply. A catchphrase that is still being diligently preached today by the Catholic Oberfritzen and his soutane, henchmen in Rome and their satellites, and continues to be spread around the world so that human beings can multiply like guinea pigs in all countries for the purpose of gaining sheep and diligent mite donors. The resulting overpopulation naturally also requires more food, much more energy, many more raw materials, and much more besides. In terms of food alone, it can ultimately only end in natural plant products, soon becoming a rarity, because the entire food requirement for the completely overflowing human population can only be produced by purely chemical means. This is already partly the case today, as the demand for food has risen inexorably in recent decades. However, it is not only the problem of food procurement that has increased inexorably, but also the problem of energy shortages and water shortages, as well as the air we breathe, which is becoming increasingly polluted. There are many other things to mention, but that would fill many pages.